Chandler Education Association and VIP. My name is Leanna Farmer, and I'm the president of Chandler Education Association. Thank you. During this nonpartisan event, in the essence of time and fairness, we ask that the candidates adhere to the time limits and that they not attack one another. We're a loving group around here. We'd also ask that the audience hold all applause and cheering until the end, in essence of time. And we do thank you for being wanting to encourage them on, but we'll did all that done at the end of the forum. And I was just notified that this is the first event that all candidates for this office have been in attendance. So we're very grateful that we get to host that here in Chandler. As I say your name, I'll introduce you all. Would you please just raise your hand so we'll know who's who. Stacy Banks, Bob Branch, incumbent Diane Douglas, Jonathan Gelbert, Kathy Hoffman, Tracy Livingston, Frank Riggs, and David Shapira. They are all here with us today, and again, thank you for your attendance. And we thank you for your fortitude and drive in running for this office. I think that the number of candidates running speaks volumes for the importance of the office and the significance in this elected position. And the importance of what it says about education today, and all of your attendance also lets us know that it's important for all of us, not just candidates or teachers. So thank you again. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would please rise as the Chandler High School Air Force Junior ROTC proudly present our colors.
Colors. Forward, march. Color guard. Hold. Center, face. Ready, set. Colors.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order, colors. Center, pace. Forward, march.
Thank you to Lieutenant Colonel Jones, Dr. Junior ROTC. Thank you. You can all be seated. Next, I'd like to introduce Liz Lavis, and she is the co-president of the Tempe Education Association. She's a very active member in the Arizona Education Association, as well as Valley Interfaith Project. Liz is going to provide an overview of education in Arizona today. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, Leanna. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Good evening. Like she said, my name is Liz Lavis, and I'm the co-president for the Tempe Elementary Education Association, and we are members of VIP. We are here this evening to have a conversation regarding the future of Arizona students, and to participate in the democracy by listening to the candidate for Superintendent of Public Instruction. The Superintendent of Public Instruction is one of the public officials who is key in the decisions that affect Arizona schools. They are the leader in the Department of Education. They sit on the State Board of Education, a high-profile spokesperson for the Arizona's education system, and potentially the lead advocate for Arizona's children. And in Arizona, now more than ever, we need a strong advocate in education. Some say we spend more on education than ever before, but that accounts for the growing number of students and covering inflation. In fact, we are still spending about $1,000 less per student than we did 10 years ago. There is a $900 million hole in our education budget that represents the cuts made over the last 10 years. Kindergarten, school supplies, building maintenance, utilities, teacher professional development, teacher salary, and much more. And not only are we spending less per student than we did a decade ago, even if we catch up to pre-recession levels, we are still 48 in per pupil spending. That's $3,500 per student below the U.S. average. And yes, money does matter. Ask any teacher how they can still afford to stay in the profession. We need to invest in education as a building block for our future. We need to get back to the letter and spirit of the Arizona Constitution and invest in our schools. The Superintendent of Public Instruction needs to be a champion for that investment. Our children deserve an education system where they are placed first in an optimal learning environment that fosters curiosity and the determination to overcome challenges. They deserve more than 48 in the nation in per pupil spending. Our student learning conditions are our teacher working conditions. We have quality educators and leaving the profession in order to sustain their own family. Imagine what our classrooms could be if we paid teachers adequately and funded schools to provide an optimal learning environment. The lack of funding isn't the only pressure that we have on teachers. Arizona lawmakers are determined to grade schools based on a single standardized test, a point in time in a child's life. We have examined the research, and we know that the research says that these test scores and the school grades that follow reflect more about a student's and a child's neighborhood and socioeconomic status than the quality of the school or the potential of that child. The candidates here will have an opportunity to weigh in on these public decisions that impact our schools. They will have a vote on the State Board of Education and a voice with the legislator and a public profile that represents Arizona's commitment to education. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Liz, for your overview. Next, we're going to hear from 3 teachers.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Sarah Crispin, and I have been an educator for 11 years here in the Chandler Unified School District. I am also a member of Chandler Education Association. I am a product of our public school system, and I believe in it. As a child, I had an uncertain and challenging family dynamics, like many children today. These uncertainties made school difficult, and I often struggled as a student. My teachers and other important adults made a difference in my life and helped me to where I am today. I became a teacher because I relate to so many of our struggling children, and I too want to make a difference in their lives and in our community. I obtained my master's degree, which was an important step in my growth and development as an instructor. However, it was costly, and I will have student debt for at least the next 10 years. As a teacher, I was unable to afford cost of a living and housing of my own. Despite my concentrated home search, my teaching salary only afforded me homes that were in poor, rundown areas. Discouraged, I opted to rent a room from my uncle and did so for 9 years. A year and a half ago, my teaching salary finally reached a level where I could move out of my uncle's home and rent a modest 1-bedroom apartment. I am grateful for my apartment, but living paycheck to paycheck is very stressful. To supplement my income, I have a dog sitting business on the side. I rely on this supplemental income to help make ends meet. Budget cuts affect our buildings, our teaching materials, our class sizes, our student services, and much more. However, budget cuts also impact the personal lives of those who give their time, emotional energies, financial resources, and the passion for the children they serve. Teachers like myself.
Hello everyone, my name is Stacy Shaw and I teach 5th grade at Bologna Elementary here in Chandler. I've been teaching for 19 years and in that time I've taught kindergarten, 2nd grade, and 5th grade. For the past 11 years, I've worked a second job. Originally it was to help pay for my children's braces and other extracurricular activities, but there is always something. Currently, my second and third jobs are working part-time at Kohl's and tutoring through Arizona Department of Education. I completed a second master's degree, which moved me over on the pay scale about $200 a month. But it will take me about 10 years at $200 a month to pay off the student loan I had to get to pay for that degree. My class size this year is decent at 22 students, but it's a challenging group with 15 students who are working below grade level. Our school's budget for reading specialists and counselors is not enough to meet all of the needs of our students. 5th and 6th grade are not receiving extra reading support, and our counselor is so busy with discipline that she rarely has time to work with kids. I've always been passionate about teaching, but with 3 college degrees, I should not need to work a second job and be sneaking school supplies into my grocery budget while hoping my husband doesn't notice.
Hi, my name is Carrie Beers. I teach 7th grade language arts at Tempe Academy and Tempe Elementary, and I'm also a proud member of the Tempe Elementary Education Association. So my school is a really small school, and we only have a part-time counselor. So we have a counselor 2 days a week, and the other 3 days we share her with the elementary school across the street. She's on campus on Mondays and Tuesdays. But a couple weeks ago, I had a student come up to me and say, "Ms. Beers, we have a problem." He was visibly upset, was choked up as he said the words, and I pulled him aside and asked him what was wrong and how I could help him. He broke down in tears and told me he didn't see his friend after lunch and was worried about what he was doing. He confided in me that his friend was talking about committing suicide and that he was scared he might have left campus to follow through on those plans. It was Thursday, and our counselor was not on campus, and I had a room full of students who were finishing up their bell work. I called the nurse and sent him down, and she did her best to comfort him and check on the other students' safety. My student still returned, visibly shaken, halfway through the class period, and struggled to focus for the rest of the class period. Our students deserve someone to have someone on campus full-time every day in case they need it.
Stories with us and for setting the stage of the reason we are here. I invite the Reverend Dr. Robin Hollis, Deacon at St. James Episcopal Church and an Active Valley Interfaith Project leader. Deacon Robin will serve as our moderator this evening.
Thank you all. I'm just trying to move because I like to look at the faces. Our 8 candidates have received 5 questions in advance, and they were told that they had 2 minutes to answer each of these questions. Their responses can be tracked on a handout that you should have received when you signed in. It's a yellow sheet of paper like this. If you don't have one, if you raise your hand, someone from Chandler Educational Association will bring you one. We all have them? Super job, registration team. Oh, okay, we've got a couple in the back there. Raise your hands high and the CEO will bring them to you. Thank you. Keep them raised. There you go. This is important stuff. We ask now that there be no clapping and cheering either before, during, or after our candidate responses. Susan Skousen is the corresponding secretary for the CEA Executive Board, and she is our official timer. She will be holding up a yellow card for our candidates when they have 30 seconds remaining, and then it turns to red when they need to be finished. And if they're not finished, I have my cane over here, and I'll just, yank it. We'll figure it out. We do respectfully ask that you adhere to our time limits if you can, please. The candidates' speaking order was randomly determined for the final question. For the earlier questions, we did go in alphabetical order. So I will read the question, and then I will invite the particular candidate to then step to the front and answer it, and we'll continue on down through all of our 8 candidates. So question number 1, here we go. In 2017, candidates, the legislature passed SB 1431, which made all K-12 students eligible to receive empowerment scholarship vouchers. In November, voters will have an opportunity to vote on Proposition 305, which could potentially reverse this expansion. And how would you vote on Proposition 305 and why? And we will begin with Ms. Banks.
Hello, can everybody hear me okay? So Stacy Banks. The question is, how would I vote on the expansion of the empowerment scholarship accounts? And I would vote no on Proposition 305. I was not in favor of the expansion when it passed. I am not opposed to the existence of ESAs in small numbers to hit niche needs for students, perhaps with a disability, or perhaps they live in a rural area where there aren't a lot of options available. But for the most part, the expansion of that voucher system was unnecessary. I'm opposed to it for 3 reasons. The first reason is it's simply bad policy. It doesn't solve an existing problem. It leaves children in schools that have been deemed failing and said, well, you didn't bother to leave, so good luck to you. That's not acceptable to me. The people in favor of the expansion say your zip code shouldn't determine the education that is available to you, and I agree with that statement completely. So what I would like to do is ensure that every child has access to a great school in or very close to their own zip code. That's what's important. I'm also quite frankly opposed to what amounts to an end run around the Constitution. The ESAs are government taxpayer dollars going predominantly to church schools. I'm not opposed to the existence of private education. I'm not opposed to people sending their children to those schools, but I don't believe that's an appropriate use of tax dollars. If I had any other doubts, I read the Auditor General's report about the program, and it is very difficult to provide oversight that ensures these tax dollars are spent responsibly. So for all of those reasons, I would vote no on 305.
Thank you, Ms. Banks. Dr. Branch.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you for having us here tonight. It's truly wonderful to see everybody here and hearing your questions. You're really concerned citizens, as we are all concerned up here about education as well. I believe in order to answer this question, one's got to separate themselves from who they are as opposed to what they will represent. I agree with my opponent here that says that we have failing school systems. We have failing systems, and we, as the SPI, we have to deal and work with these school systems and make them better. I agree that we got to bring in more money to this. I teach teachers for a living. That's what I do. I teach to the doctorate level, and I see this. I also teach faith-based, and I believe that we should have school choices. So as the SPI, I want to work to make sure that all of our schools and all of our children, wherever you're at, whether rural or urban, have a quality education and have a quality school to go to. However, right now, we don't have that. And since we don't have that, I look at these vouchers as basically Band-Aids to fix the problem. I understand that. So my vote will be in favor of expanding it, but that's Bob Branch, the person. Dr. Bob Branch, SPI, wants to work with every school to make sure that school is not an F school. That school is giving an excellent, amazing education to our students as they deserve. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Branch. Ms. Douglas. Please remember, no clapping, no body language. You need to be statues. Thank you.
We're in the congregation.
I'm Diane Douglas, and I have the honor and privilege of serving you as Arizona Superintendent of Public Instruction. And I believe I have the best job in the state because there is nothing more important than the education of our children. And it's not merely about making them worker bees, and it's not merely about making them college applicants. It's about making them successful citizens so they can protect and perpetuate our great republic. I'm in a little bit of an unusual situation here with this particular question because by legislation and by statute, I am the agent who is responsible for this program. So I'm a fiduciary agent through the department. We are also the administrative agent. So since it is something that the legislature passed, I don't feel it's appropriate for me to take a stance on it one way or the other. My job in my current role is to make sure that it is administered fairly and appropriately, and to make sure that we're good stewards and good watchdogs of all the taxpayer money that the legislature has decided to put into this program. But I will share with you, and I'm not a betting woman by any stretch of the imagination, but I can't help but wonder if any of us will actually vote on Prop 305. And let me explain to you why. We're still waiting in the courts for it to be determined whether they're actually, the petitions have matched the ballot challenge. If it goes to the ballot, I have a feeling our legislature will remove it and repeal the law, because my guess is for fear of voter protection that will kick in on that. But I assure you, as long as I hold this job, every dime will be accounted for appropriately. Thank you.
Ms. Douglas, we need you to answer as a candidate if you would, yes or no.
I as the fiduciary response agent responsible for that, I will not put myself in that, because I have to be fair to all the taxpayers on the other side. I will assure you, whatever they order to be done, we will do it.
Thank you. Mr. Gilbart.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Jonathan Gilbart, Republican candidate for Superintendent of Public Instruction. It's great to be here in Chandler. I grew up here in Phoenix area on the northwest side of town, Deer Valley District. So Chandler was always this mysterious place on the other side, 45 minutes away, with the Ostrich Festival and ridiculously good public schools that always slaughtered us in sports. So you have a lot to be proud of here in Chandler. For the ESA program, look, the way I look at this, the context I look at this is our responsibility here in Arizona, all of us who care about education, our goal has to be getting as many kids as possible access to an excellent education. As many kids as possible access to an excellent education. So in my view, if there's any chance that this ESA expansion will get us closer to that goal, then we should give it a shot. This is a limited scope pilot program that's never been done anywhere in the country at this scale and of this extent. And so we have a lot of potential here in Arizona to see what's possible, to see what innovations this promotes and allows. And so for that reason, I'm supportive of the program. Now that being said, it's got some issues. I would love to see the legislature make some tweaks to the program to make sure that low-income families have priority in the program, to make sure that there's strict accountability and prevention of fraud and abuse. And at the end of the day, as Superintendent of Public Instruction, that's what we would have direct control over, is that the management of the program and the oversight of those funds. And I will absolutely commit to making sure that those funds are used properly and efficiently. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbart. Ms. Hudson.
Good evening. My name is Kathy Hoffman, and I'm a Democratic candidate for Superintendent of Public Instruction. And thank you so much for being here today. To answer the question, I would absolutely vote no this November, no to vouchers, because our public schools cannot afford to lose a dollar. Our schools, our students deserve to have a high-quality public school education in their local neighborhood. I currently work in a Title I school, and I can tell you the students that I work with absolutely rely on the programs and services that our public schools offer. They need free and reduced lunches, transportation, tutoring, and comprehensive special education services. I work in special education, and I want to share with you a quick story about one of my students. I refer to this student as Mason, and Mason has brain damage from seizures, and he's unable to say any words. And when I first started working with Mason, when he was in the first grade, Mason's mother shared with me that he was only using a few picture cards to communicate. Mason had a picture card that said eat for when he was hungry, and a picture card for drink for when he was thirsty. But Mason only had 6 picture cards. Can you imagine only having 6 picture cards to communicate all of your ideas with friends and family? Fortunately, through the resources available to me in the public schools, I was able to train Mason to use an iPad to communicate. And with this iPad, his vocabulary exploded, and he was quickly able to say all of his friends' names, talk about his favorite movies, and say, "I love you," to his mother. Our students, like Mason, absolutely rely on having these resources in the public schools, and all students deserve to have this type of high-quality public school education, which is why we must say no to vouchers.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman. Ms. Livingston.
Good evening. My name is Tracy Livingston. I've taught for 16 years in the state of Arizona, 2 years in California, and I homeschooled my son here in the state of Arizona. So my answer is going to be a little bit different, but bear with me. It's got a story with it, but I have a real answer. No, I'm going to vote for the ESAs. No booze. Here's why. For the 16 years that I taught, I chose to teach in a Title I school. I then chose for my own family to send my child to a private school. Choice is everything. Why would I want to take it away from any family? You can choose to go to any public school within your district. We've been choosing for a long time. But we all have this fear. And I do have a little concern about the religious aspect. But not enough to not vote yes. No. I will vote yes. I think choice in this state is something we need to embrace. And choice isn't going away. Every state's catching on. Our federal government's going in that direction. And we can't stay in the past. We need to move forward. As for our public schools, since I'm a public school teacher, you better believe I'm going to fight tooth and nail to get everything you need. Because, as was stated by the earlier testaments, your pay is not great. You don't have enough resources. And you are hiding from your husband, your pencils and whatnot, because I've done the same thing. I do support choice, but I do not support your suffering.
Thank you, Ms. Livingston. Mr. Riggs.
Thank you, Pastor. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Frank Riggs, and I want you to know this teacher, coach, mentor, youth leader, former school board president, charter school president, former United States Congressman, chairman of the House Education Subcommittee, and CEO of a national education nonprofit, salutes all of you in the education profession. It's truly a noble calling. First of all, on the question, I'm opposed to any legal maneuvering to try to kick Prop 305 off the ballot. The people that circulated the petitions in the dead of the summer, I think, deserve an up or down vote. And frankly, for something of this magnitude, I think a public referendum, putting the vote to the people's will is in order. ESA started out as a special program. First for kids with special needs and learning disabilities, something near and dear to my heart, because I'm the author of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act of 1998. Then it was expanded to foster children. Then it was expanded to military dependents with sibling preference. And now a limited cap expansion. Now my advice for the governor and legislature was to means test the expansion. Give parents of low-income children who qualify for the federal free lunch program priority. Increase the dollar amount, since that's one of the criticisms of ESAs, that the amount doesn't go far enough to defray private school tuition, even though a lot of private parochial schools provide tuition assistance and waivers. And on that basis, as I understand Prop 305, it's a no vote, right? That supports the expansion of ESAs. So I'm going to support the expansion of ESAs because it's capped, but I'm going to work with the legislature to try to truly means test the expanded ESAs. And then as superintendent of public instruction, I'm going to make sure that that program is run with complete transparency and accountability.
Thank you, Mr. Riggs. Mr. Shapiro.
Thank you. I'm David Shapiro, and I am a no vote on Prop 305, which stops vouchers. I am opposed to private school vouchers. I want to tell you why. One of the, first I want to say, I started as a public school teacher. Started my career as a public school teacher. I was a member of PBEA at Paradise Valley School District, an ABA member. My wife is an educator, also an ABA member. I am also a public school parent. My wife and I send our girls to public school in Tempe. I've been a school board member, I've been a school administrator, and I've been a state legislator serving on the education committee. And from each of those perspectives, I have the opportunity to get a good sense of what's going on in our school system. And one of the folks said that we have failures in our public schools, and that's why we need vouchers. And I want to talk quickly about those failures. The failures that exist in our education system are not failures of the education system, they are failures of the political system in this state. The failures in our political system are trickling into our education system. The fact that we have 2,000 vacant teaching positions in this state is not a failure of our education system, it's a failure of our political system. The fact that we have teachers that have to dig into their own pockets to buy school supplies is not a failure of our education system, it's a failure of our political system. The fact that teachers have to work 2 jobs, not to buy a boat or a second home, but to pay their mortgage, to pay for their car payments, to put gas in their car to get to school, that is not a failure of our education system, it is a failure of our political system. Those are the failures that we have to confront in this state. I want to be clear about ESAs, school vouchers. We were told a lie by the legislature. The lie we were told was that school vouchers were meant for poor kids in poor areas. Here's the problem with that. The private schools largely are not in those poor areas. We have poor kids in poor areas in the state that are 100 miles away from a high-quality private school. And when that parent takes their kid to that school and plops down that $5,000 school voucher and says, I'd like to enter my kid first, the private school can just say no. Private schools are not required to accept students. Second, the private school will very likely say, if that kid's in high school, you owe another $7,000 because that's the cost of tuition at these schools, even after the $5,000 voucher. It's a lie, that's why we have to vote no.
Thank you, Mr. Shapiro. I also just want to remind everyone that you have the biographies of our candidates, and you want to refer to these from time to time, just so you understand their background and where they're coming from. And again, I remind our audience attendees as well, I know this is very an emotional time for a lot of us, but I ask that you please try to keep your body language to yourself internally. Does that make sense? Oh, wait a minute, I may be saying the wrong thing. Who knows where I'm going with that one? Okay, I think it's time.
Watch it very carefully.
Watch it very carefully. Okay, we're moving on to question number 2. We're doing well on time. Thank you, candidates, for helping us do that. Question number 2. There has been a tremendous amount of debate about giving schools letter grades based largely on student growth and proficiency. How would you ensure our schools are evaluated in an equitable manner? And we will start with Dr. Branch.
Thank you very much. I've never heard anybody say, keep your body language to yourself. That's excellent. As a teacher, we rely on body language, so give us your body language. When I see an F on a restaurant, I don't go in. But I also know that they know how to assess restaurants. When I see that we have schools that are getting B's, C's, and F's, and I've worked with teachers and I've worked with schools and I have seen the inability of this office to assess anything, whether or not it is Common Core's assessment of AZ merit, or whether it's Ames testing. The problem is we keep sending people up to this office that don't have a clue on assessments and how to do this. Well, I teach at 3 different universities right now. I teach at Liberty University, I teach at Grand Canyon University, but I also am the chairman for the content of the Doctorate in Management and Information Systems Technology. I have designed classes, courses from the undergraduate to the graduate and to the doctorate level. And not only that, I design programs. I'm the only one up here that has ever designed a PhD program, an MBA program, and I'm the only one up here with the background, the credentials to walk into any superintendent's office and discuss with them their scores and understand their scores. It was totally unfair. For instance, I know some schools that got a B-. Why? Because they only had 2 years of any data. Yet, all their graduates went to college. Thank you very much. My time is up.
Thank you, Dr. Branch. Ms. Douglas, and just a quick reminder, we really appreciate and recognize your fiduciary responsibilities and your role, current role. We do understand that. But tonight we're asking you to wear a candidate hat and help us understand your perspective from a candidate. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So we have a test here in Arizona. It's called the AZ Merit Test. And what we are trying to do is extrapolate it to all kinds of data and information in our A through F accountability system. We're taking a test that was intended to determine how well our children are doing on their academic work, and we're now pretending that we can know from that the quality of their teachers, the quality of their schools, and the quality of their districts. That's why every time A through F comes before the board, I vote against it, because it's not a good measurement system of how our schools are doing. What my vision is for our schools is to create a comprehensive report card so that we can have, and this fulfills the requirements for testing for the feds, how have they done on growth and proficiency, and that can just be a number. What we're doing right now is we have an awful horrible rubric, and we voted on yet more changes to the 27 school year yesterday. I voted no again. Because our schools need this information to be able to move forward. It needs to be clear, it needs to be concise, and it is none of the above. So my vision is that we have a report card that will show the schools that how did you do on, or show parents and the community, how did you do on growth, how did you do on proficiency, but then what other, I'll call them amenities for lack of a better word, what other services does your school provide? To some parents, especially parents that might have a disabled child, a nurse on campus each and every single day might be their priority. For some, it's extracurricular activities. There are a whole lot of ways to evaluate and grade a school, and we know our parents pick them. So the more information we can give them, the better off they will be.
Thank you, Ms. Douglas. Mr. Gilbert.
Thank you. So the school letter grades have been pretty controversial lately, and this has been a very long, drawn-out process for those of you who've been tracking the headlines. There have been multiple technical advisory committees and all these things of tweaking, trying this, trying that. And what I haven't seen in the discussion is the question of what's the goal of the letter grades? Why are we doing this? What do we want to achieve at the end of the day? And to me, there's two goals. One is to provide parents and families with a clear indicator of the quality of a given school. And second is to give the schools a clear rubric to aspire to and judge themselves on. And I'm not sure we've achieved those goals right now. There's an inherent tension between proficiency and growth. And when you try to collapse that down to a single letter grade, that's when people are unhappy. And that's why people haven't been happy with the latest letter grades. If you've got a school where all the kids are proficient, but they're not getting much growth, and on the other hand, you have a school where few of the kids are proficient, but they're showing a lot of growth, that's really apples and oranges. It's very hard to compare the two. So I do think we have to get a more detailed rubric in place where you're judging those things separately. I think the attempt in the letter grades to include broader things like AP tests and extracurriculars and career technical education, I think that's a good thing. That might be a little bit too complex right now, but I think the spirit is good to diversify ourselves away from just test scores. So overall, I would look forward to providing more information for parents, more categories of information, and getting a better system in place for our schools.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Ms. Hoffman.
Thank you. My biggest issue with the way our current school grading system is set up, that it is based almost entirely on standardized test scores. It is not acceptable for our teachers to be graded so heavily on standardized test scores, and we should let our teachers teach rather than being stressed out about how their students are going to perform on the AZ merit. And we know that as it stands right now with our current grading system, that our students who are attending Title I schools are disproportionately receiving more of the failing grades. And how do you think it feels to be one of these parents or teachers who receives an F grade for their school when they are working so hard to overcome challenges and obstacles, such as students who are wondering where their next meal is going to come from? Or many of our students, especially out in rural parts of the states, don't have a computer at home or internet access. So honestly, I'm not even going to take my full time on this question because we should not be grading schools until we fully fund our public schools because the grades they are receiving at this time are completely unjust.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman. Ms. Livingston.
In a few weeks, some of you in here will start reviewing for the AZ Merit. I was where you were last year. I remember when we started the grading system. We all thought that was just nuts. But we worked around it, we worked hard. That was back in the days when we had the Ames. Some of you remember that. And before that, we had nothing. Some of you remember that. Those were the good days, I refer to them as. But now we have the AZ Merit, and we're taking one moment in time. At Dysart last year, my high school, Dysart High, it took us 3 weeks to take the test. After that, my freshman said, we're done, right? Said, no, now you have science, next you have your Cambridge exams, and then you have your finals. Taking one moment in time on a test that, well, no one's doing very well on. There's growth, but there's a lot of areas that need some help in this test. It doesn't work. So first we have to start with the test. I want to free the districts and the teachers. If I was elected, you would have the menu test. Let your districts choose. ACT, SAT, Cambridge, like Dysart was. Whatever your district wants. Then go ahead and teach all year to just teach. Take that test and implement the scores. Are scores going to be part of our normal everyday life? I think so. But I agree with most people up here right now. We shouldn't just look at a score. We should look at the environment, CTE. Having a nurse 1 day a week isn't acceptable. A nurse every day, counselors every day. We need to look at the school and the parents' communication, how the parents are feeling.
Thank you, Ms. Livingston. Mr. Riggs.
I really appreciate the question. I first want to say that I believe parents should be empowered to choose and direct their child's education. I think that's one of the most important responsibilities a parent has, saying that as a parent of 3 grown children, grandfather of 5. And I believe educators, especially classroom teachers, should be empowered to manage their classrooms with the freedom and autonomy they crave. As to AF report, the school report card, it's nonsense. It's truly nonsense. It is, as has been mentioned, it's the primary measurement for giving the AZ Merit, the 6 standardized test, and kids can't be standardized, by the way, as you all know. But it's the primary measurement for giving a school, and by extension, the educators who work at that school, a grade. You know, folks, I've been involved in education for over 30 years, kind of dating myself, going back to the Nation at Risk study in Ronald Reagan's administration. And over that time, I've seen all the silver bullets, all the trends, all the panaceas come and go, but the fact remains that those schools that serve a significant number of disadvantaged segments of the student population, I'm talking about kids living in poverty or coming from low-income households, I'm talking about students with special needs and learning disabilities, I'm talking about our border state, non or limited English-speaking students, I'm talking about our Native American students in the northeast corner of the state. Those are the schools that are stigmatized by the school report grade, but yet they're the ones that need the additional resources to work with those segments of the student population and give them the early intervention and intensive services, the individual instruction, individual and small group instruction that they need to improve the performance of those students, who today we call the students that comprise the achievement gap. Because they enter the public school system, they're already developmentally behind peer and grade level, and unfortunately, all too often, if those schools and those students aren't getting the additional services, that gap only grows wider in the later years.
Thank you, Mr. Riggs. Mr. Shapira.
So I would like to do the same analysis that Mr. Gelbart did, although I may come to a different conclusion. And I first want to ask you a question. Did you notice that everybody up here is opposed to the A-through F letter grade system? You might be thinking to yourself, why does it exist? So I'm going to enter that question into the analysis. I spent some time in the legislature. I was there in the legislature when we converted to the 8th through F letter grade system, and I opposed that conversion at that time. And I want to tell you what I think really is at the root of the 8th through F letter grades, and that is, this was an effort at the legislature to label public schools, publicly funded schools, so that some would get F's and D's and C's and maybe even, oh, a B, my gosh. And that parents would then want to take their child out of the publicly funded school and put them into a for-profit private school. That is the reason behind letter grades. That is the core reason about why it started. Now, why are people against them now? Well, a funny thing happened. Some of the folks in the legislature who are big proponents of letter grades, like Sylvia Allen, who's now the chair of the Senate Education Committee, owns a charter school. A lot of folks in the legislature actually happen to own charter schools, and some have owned private school tuition organizations as well. But some of those charter school owners, like Sylvia Allen, found out that under this letter grade system, her school is F-rated. Gives us a little bit of a sense of why things are starting to shift now away from A through F letter grades. Some unintended consequences there. Look, we're having the wrong conversations. The conversation we should be having right now is how do we attract and retain great teachers in our schools? How do we give those teachers the autonomy and the resources that they need to do their jobs to help our students to be successful? That's the conversation we should be having right now. In reality, if we wanted letter grades and we wanted to get the outcome that we got in this complicated formula that the state board created, we could have just taken a heat map of poverty in this state and awarded F's for high poverty areas and A's for low poverty areas, high income areas, and it would have been done. But the reality is, this is not the root, this is not the reason for the letter grades, and we're having the wrong conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Shapiro. And again, I just want to remind the audience, if we could not, well, you know.
We get to blink like hostages.
And we have Ms. Deng.
Yes.
You're up for
So-
question number 2.
Thank you. So my background is measurement evaluation. I was a teacher for 10 years, but then I got my master's degree in measurement evaluation, so it's going to be really hard for me to fit in everything I want to say in 2 minutes. I will try not to talk too fast. First thing that has to go, obviously, is the actual letter, right? We cannot roll up everything that a school does into this one number that gives us a letter and tells us what's actually happening at that school. So the letter has to go, and then we can continue to measure students with an assessment. The minimum assessment problem is if District 1 is using one assessment and District 2 is using a different assessment, how can we create any kind of system that measures them and compares them? So if we want to continue to compare schools, we don't have to, but if we want to continue to compare schools, there has to be a single test. What we can do, not necessarily in favor of that, by the way, but if we're going to do it, that's what we have to do. What we can do is limit the value of that score in the evaluation of the school. I would say at elementary school levels, it should not exceed 40% of the score, if it even hits that. I would say that proficiency can be 20% maximum, and growth can be 20% maximum, but you should only measure the bottom 50% for growth. That way you don't penalize students who are all performing at a high level. In addition to that, what we have to do is measure inputs. Nobody wants to measure inputs, but the reality is what you measure, you incentivize schools to do. We know what improves outcomes for all kids. PE, every day. Recess, art, literacy programs, community programs. We can measure all of those inputs, and we can then give a true picture of what is happening at a school. If you want choice, schools have a mission that they communicate to people. We can say this is how they're doing on that mission. There's lots of ways to do it, and we can do it differently.
Thank you, Ms. Deng. Candidates, we're on to question number 3 now. Our current education funding is $1 billion less than it was in 2008, and Arizona currently ranks 48th in the nation in per pupil spending. How can our state provide sustained funding to ensure quality public education for all Arizona students? And Ms. Douglas, you're up.
Thank you. Our teachers are 48th and 50th in teacher pay. And we know, through the research I did, Arizona is not at the bottom when we look at our cost of living. We're about in the middle of the pack. So our teachers do not deserve to be paid so poorly. I was the first elected official to come out with a plan to boost teachers' pay. That's an increase and an extension, a permanent extension of Prop 301. Currently, it's 0.6 of a cent. With a lot of that money, only about 56% of that money actually goes to our teachers in the classroom. So I want to see it go up to a full penny. That would generate another $400 million for our teachers. It would generate three quarters of it to teacher salaries, which would give our teachers a $5,000 a year bump in their salary, or as my PIO reminds me, groceries for a family of 4, or more than pay your student loans that you have for a year. But the other thing we need is no cliffs on it, because I've been on a school board and I know how hard it is when funding comes and funding goes. I'm not a fan of sales taxes. I believe it hurts the people we most want to help, our low-income population. But that's the mechanism we readily have in place right now. A bigger, better discussion I think we need to have is how do we get more revenue into the state of Arizona? I've heard a great plan that pertains to excise tax. We are a huge exporter of energy in Arizona. The companies that export it make a lot of money, but the citizens of Arizona get nothing for the natural resource that we provide. So and that's not the only idea, there are many other ideas, but that's the discussion we have to have here in Arizona. We don't own our state land, we don't have good revenue streams, so we need to look for new ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Douglas. Mr. Gilbert.
So we've been playing the budget cuts dance in Arizona for about 20 years. When I was a kid, in first grade even, they were already talking about, sorry, we've got to cut this program or this program because of budget cuts. This has been going on for a long time. And it's clear at this point that the only way we're going to get funding back to where we need to be is through a new revenue source. We've already found all the pennies in the couch cushions at this point. We're not going to find $1 billion a year lying around somewhere in the state general fund. We're not going to find $1 billion a year in school administrative costs. We're not going to even find it in facilities efficiency improvements, which I support. So we've got to have a new funding source. And that new funding source, that new funding plan has to be permanent and sustainable. And so the way that I think we should do this is the governor recently came out with his 5-year plan to fully restore district additional assistance for capital funding. I would like to see a 5-year plan to restore all of the funding. And that's got to include everything. That's got to include, what do we do with Prop 301? We've got to keep it at least. Do we expand it? Do we look at something like the power excise tax? Do we look at something like the soda tax that someone suggested? What are we going to do with Prop 123? Prop 123 feels brand new, but it's already going to expire in 8 years. We've got to think longer term and figure out how we're going to get a strong, stable funding source for our schools and stop kind of living hand to mouth year to year. So that's the way I look at it, and I'll look forward to working with the legislature, with the governor, with the business community, with all the stakeholders to try to come up with that 5-year plan to really get us on the right track to restoring dollars for our schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Ms. Hoffman.
Thank you. I have to start by answering any question that has to do with school funding with, we cannot let vouchers take another dollar out of our public schools. Vouchers would further defund our public schools, and we just absolutely cannot afford to lose another dollar out of our public schools, which are already starved. And how do I know they're starved? Because we have teachers and parents paying for school supplies. I want to take a quick survey. Please raise your hand if you have already spent at least $50 this school year on school supplies. I'm guessing most people. I'm not asking for an opinion. Keep your hand up if it's over $100. I'm right there with you. It is unacceptable that our teachers and parents are paying for school supplies that should be coming from our government. And I will say what perhaps no one up here wants to say. It is our tax dollars. Your tax dollars, my tax dollars, everyone in the community should be paying their fair share to make sure that our schools are fully funded, because we want our community and our children to have people who are not only productive, but also well-rounded. We want our kids to have the opportunities to have music, science, art, technology, field trips, and more. And so it is absolutely critical that when I am superintendent, that my first order of business would be to bring more funding into our public schools, because I think that our legislature and our governor need to step up and get the job done, because our public schools should not be funded by our teachers and parents to provide the school supplies that every child needs.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman. Ms. Livingston.
43, this is not going to shock you, you've read my bio, I'm a conservative. 43% of our budget goes to schools. After 16 years and a master's degree in English as a second language, I took home $45,000 a year. That was including a stipend because I was a theater teacher. That's not right. I spent on average $2,000 a year for my classroom. Maybe it was a bit excessive, but I totaled it up the entire year, and so did my husband. We shouldn't have to do that. But let's be honest for a moment. We do have a shortage, obviously. There's no way to get around that. But if we wanted to at least bring us to the middle of the pack, or just boost it up by $1,000, let's say, that's about 50% increase in sales tax. Now think silently, you're not allowed to move. Is our entire state going to vote yes on that? Not just you in the room, but our entire state. Is that realistic? I'm not going to give an answer. But what I am going to say is that the superintendent has two main functions: to implement policy and to lobby the House, the Senate, and the governor and the governor's staff. I was asked to run last year. I didn't think this would be a good time, that I just thought riding around the state to get some position would be grand. I was asked to run to be the voice of the teachers and the voice of reason, kind of a middle of the road, so to speak. I see both sides, but I also am very clear in the reality of the state. I want to do what's best for you, but really, 50% increase in our sales tax. Think about that. Has to be a slow, measured, incremental plan.
Thank you, Ms. Livingston. Mr. Riggs.
Well, yes, K-12 education is 43% of the state general fund, but the state general fund is almost $1 billion lower than it was a decade ago, before the Great Recession. I want to apply two metrics. One, to catch us up with K-12 education funding. I want to apply inflation and population growth. We've added 750,000 citizens over this decade, with a commensurate increase in the demand for all governmental services, including K-12 education. And secondly, I want 95 cents of every K-12 dollar going into the classroom, until we increase from where we are today, 54 cents, the lowest level in the 16 years the State Auditor General has tracked classroom spending, to the national average. And by classroom spending, I mean teacher compensation, I mean classroom supplies and materials. It's a shame that any teacher should have to come out of pocket, and for our education support professionals to have direct contact with our students. One other thing, I'm the only candidate with extensive private sector experience. I've been a CEO in the private sector, I've been a CEO in the nonprofit sector, I've signed both sides of the paycheck, I've owned my own business, successful business, I've been an entrepreneur. And I want to call on the business community to do more. I just read an article today, corporate tax revenues, corporate tax collections. Last year, $368 million, the lowest level since 2002. The business community needs to step up, because they're the ones that have the vested interest and the vital stake in an educated workforce.
Thank you, Mr. Riggs. Mr. Shapiro.
Thank you. I feel like the resident historian here, because I was teaching in the classroom. I had the Prop 301 passed. I made $6,000 more a year my first year teaching than I would have the year before, thanks to Prop 301. And I quickly, in spite of that, still became frustrated by the state of affairs in our school system because of the politics in our state capitol. So I ran for the state legislature in a district nobody thought I could win, and I went door to door and I said, my name is David Shapiro, I'm a teacher, and I believe the legislature needs the voice of an educator. And I went down to the Capitol thinking I was going to educate these folks about what's going on in our schools. I thought that they were naive. I thought that they didn't understand what was going on. And what I learned is they do. They totally get it. We have folks at the state capitol in Arizona who are intentionally working to dismantle our public education system in this state. And what I'm here to tell you is, we don't have $1.1 billion less in our schools today than we did 9 years ago because some magical thing happened, and it's not because of the recession. The reason we have a $1.1 billion hole in our public schools today is because we irresponsibly, as a state, the majority in the state legislature and a couple governors in a row decided to give massive corporate tax cuts away to folks in Arizona. We're out of the recession. Our gross domestic product in Arizona is higher today than it was 10 years ago. So why do we have $1.1 billion less in our school? Because of massive tax giveaways. I agree with the superintendent. Increasing sales tax, I don't believe is the solution because it is regressive. It most disproportionately impacts poor folks in our state. But we desperately need that revenue back. We have to close those tax loopholes that we created. We have $8 billion of tax loopholes in this state. If we close a quarter of those, which is what I will advocate for, then we will get the $1 billion plus another $1 billion back to invest in our schools. The last thing I'll say is, if I can't convince the legislature to do that my first year in the legislature, I will lead an effort, not just talk about it, not just put out a press release, I will lead the effort to go to the ballot and take away the constitutional authority from the legislature to set school funding, and we'll put a formula in the state constitution to make it happen automatically.
Thank you, Mr. Shapiro. Ms. Banks.
This is arguably the most difficult question facing us, right? If we knew the answer to how to solve this problem, we would wave the magic wand and make it happen. Do our schools need more money? Absolutely. I was fortunate to attend school in Arizona in the 80s when Arizona was at the national average. We've actually done it before. We've been in the middle. I'd like to be a little above the middle, but we've been in the middle before. And over time, we let it degrade. We let our public school system suffer. Now that said, I believe we have too many corporate tax cuts. I believe that we can dial that back. But the reality is in Arizona, we have between 16 and 24% poverty, depending on how you look at it, right? We don't talk about poverty and the impact that it's having on our state and our schools enough. So there is some truth to the notion that if we bring businesses in and they create good jobs, we then increase our tax revenue, right? But that should be done responsibly. That should be done with some common sense. We have a lot of people lobbying our legislators and getting tax cuts that don't create jobs. So those should be the first ones on the chopping block. Excise tax, I've talked to Dick Foreman about that at the Arizona Business Education Council. I think it's got some promise, but we're going to have to take on APS FRP to do that. So if you guys are ready, let's go do that. The sales tax, I'm with them on that as well. The sales tax is regressive and not the best way to fund things. But if we at least continue that, then that helps our schools. We need more revenue. To say that it's 43% of the budget is disingenuous. If the budget shrinks, then it's a large percentage. We need to bring in more money. And we have to work together to do it. But the reality is, I agree with Kathy, taxes are what pay for this stuff. And if I need to pay a little bit more, I'm willing to do that in order to protect our schools.
Thank you, Ms. Banks. Dr. Branch.
Thank you very much. My mother said that you can tell it's an election year when you start hearing Republicans talk about tax increases. This is where I differ from anybody up here. I believe that the money is there. It is there if we do one thing, and that is get rid of the United States Department of Education. We have congressmen that spend a significant amount of time writing bills, and when those bills get passed into law on education, there's requirements. Those requirements go to the state, those requirements go to the county, and those requirements come down to the local education associations. That creates a bureaucracy. That bureaucracy, for instance, a lot has been said about Title I, as if there's one school. The reality is almost 77% of our schools in this state are Title I. Every one of them has people there required to submit to the government their proposals asking for money to the United States government. My proposal is get rid of the U.S. Department of Education. If we do that, that 46 cents that does not come down to the classroom right now, 22 cents or 22% of our school dollars will be released down to the classroom. Those of you keeping score, that $6.4 billion budget, 22% of that's $1.4 billion directly down to the classroom. That's what I advocate. That's the reason why I'm a candidate, because we can use our dollars better than what the federal government. We're a donor state, so we send $1 up to the federal government, we only get 75 cents back. Then we beg them for more money. Well, I say we don't send that dollar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Branch. Candidates, we're into question number 4 now, and Mr. Gelfart, you will be up. Here's the question. About a month into the current school year, there were more than 1,300 unfilled teacher positions across the state. And this year alone, Arizona schools hired over 1,000 teachers who were certified to teach under a certificate that did not require any formal education training. So how would you help ensure that all Arizona classrooms are led by a highly qualified teacher?
Thank you. So the question of the teacher shortage, I've been all over Arizona over the course of this campaign, from Yuma to Douglas to Holbrook to Bullhead City. Rural and urban schools, district and charter, everyone is struggling with the teacher shortage, teacher recruitment and retention. So we've got to find a solution to that. I think there's 2 main causes. One is salaries, which we've already talked about. The second is working conditions. On salaries, I completely agree that we can't have teachers paying for school supplies out of their own pocket and qualifying for food stamps. That's just not acceptable, so we've got to solve that. But working conditions, we've got to make sure that teachers feel supported by their administration. That's another thing that I've heard over and over from teachers. They're not supported by administration on discipline issues or on grading issues. I love the story that I heard of a teacher who failed a kid because he wasn't doing his work, got hauled in front of their administration. The principal said, "Why'd you fail that kid?" And the teacher goes, "Because an F was the lowest grade I could give him." And we can't be afraid to have low expectations here. We've got to give our teachers more autonomy. Now, it's possible that we're asking too much from our teachers. We're asking our teachers to be superhuman. You're not just having to teach. You have to be social workers. You have to be disciplinarians. You have to be bureaucrats. You have to deal with parents. You have to deal with all these different things. So ASU College of Education thinks that it's not viable anymore, thinks we need to change our idea of what it means to be a teacher. So they're promoting a team teaching model where multiple people with different backgrounds and different expertise work together to teach a larger group of kids, and they rotate and they work together. And I support that idea. I think that's really innovative. As far as teacher training, some of our top performing schools like Basis and Great Hearts don't require teaching degrees, education degrees. They have retired engineers, history and English PhDs who want to give back to the kids. And now districts can do that too. Vail has done that. So districts have the opportunity to hire those folks, and I think that's a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Ms. Hoffman.
Thank you. Our students deserve to have highly qualified teachers in their classroom. And there is a reason why teachers take college-level coursework and even graduate-level coursework to become those highly qualified teachers. Unfortunately, this past year, Governor Ducey's decision to lower the bar and make it so that anyone with a professional background can become a teacher is harmful for our students. Let's take, for example, an engineer. Let's call him Steve. So Steve, the engineer, wants to teach in a classroom, and Steve knows a lot about math. But let's see how successful Steve is when he is encountered with 30 rowdy high school students, and he encounters a student with autism who needs his coursework modified. While Steve may have the breadth of knowledge and the understanding of the math concepts, he does not have the skills or training to be an effective teacher in our classrooms. And that is what we are effectively doing by opening the doors and addressing our teacher crisis in this way. And I do see that this is a solution or an idea to solve the teacher crisis, but what we really must do is fully fund our public schools. And I know I sound like a broken record here, but the true solution to the teacher crisis is to give teachers a decent, competitive wage. And furthermore, I think that we do need to address the workload issues of teacher. And if we did have the funding that our schools needed, then we could hire more paraprofessionals, school counselors, reading specialists, and behavior specialists, and other support staff to make it so that our teachers have a more manageable workload, and that way we can keep our highly qualified teachers in the position and in Arizona.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman. Ms. Livingston.
I remember the day they told me you have to start taking your garbage out and vacuuming my own floors. So do you. We've lost teachers, maybe not due to the wage. I knew I was never going to be wealthy. I started at $28,000. My first year was in Buckeye, and I traveled out to Buckeye because I made that great big salary 23 years ago. I had a master's. That was a bonus then. We're losing teachers because the conditions in the classroom and the control of the teacher is not favorable. We need to let our teachers teach. We need to have people come in and support us. The nurses, the counselors, everything that we need that helps us daily. You know what they are. But here's the thing. This is the other side of the coin. I'm elected in the Maricopa Community College Governing Board as an at-large member. I earned 220,000 votes to gain that position 3.5 years ago. As I fill out my seat, Maricopa, like ASU, is holding hands and going towards this mission of, is there a better way to have a teacher trained? We don't have all the answers yet. And neither does ASU. I mean, they seem pretty confident, don't they? On the other side of the coin, I've had teachers in my own building that came in with the CTE certification and not the full teacher certification. They were phenomenal. So who's to say that someone needs a master's or a doctorate to teach some of the classes that we hold today? My own son can teach EMT and phlebotomy, and he'd be the best darn teacher I'd ever seen. But no, he doesn't have a bachelor's quite yet in that area. So who are we to judge? I'm going to leave it up to ASU, Maricopa, and a lot of the professionals, but right now I support what's gone forward.
Thank you, Ms. Livingston. Mr. Riggs.
Well, I'd like to think I'm doing my part as a certified substitute teacher who's been teaching 7th grade history to those rambunctious preteens and advanced placement government. And I think, by the way, as a former 3-term United States Congressman, I'm highly qualified to teach American history and government, what we might call civics, which all too often, frankly, is missing from our schools because the fundamental role of our K-12 schools is to prepare young people for college, career, and citizenship, the third C. I think a couple of the governor's proposals have real merit. The Arizona Teachers Academy, so a young person that wants to go to one of our state universities, major in education, come out and teach, gets a complete tuition waiver. I'm also in favor of alternative credentialing for mid-career professionals that have demonstrated subject matter expertise, provided that they get the training and supervision in the classroom under a mentor teacher. But the bottom line is we're not paying our teachers competitively. I mean, as Republicans, as fiscal conservatives, we believe in the market principles of supply and demand. And the well-documented and acute and hopefully not chronic teacher shortage is a clear indication that we're not meeting, the supply is not meeting the demand. The other thing that we need to do on teacher compensation is be competitive with neighboring states. I don't count California because California is always the outlier, but we have to look at our other neighboring states and really get serious about putting teacher compensation as our #1 priority in K-12 education.
Thank you, Mr. Riggs. Mr. Shapiro.
This is the greatest problem that exists in our Arizona education system right now, which is why I've been talking about it all night. 2,000 vacant teaching positions in Arizona today. 52.8% of classrooms in this state today had either no teacher or a teacher who is not appropriately certified to teach that subject. That is a crisis, but I want to be clear, it is not a shortage. We do not have a teacher shortage in Arizona. You keep hearing about teacher shortage. We don't have teacher shortage. We have more certified teachers in this state than we have teaching positions. So we got plenty of teachers. We just can't convince enough of them to take a vow of poverty to educate our children. So the reality is, I'm sorry, you can't laugh. Oh, stop trying to be funny. The reality is that in the city of Tempe, where I serve on the city council, 2 years ago I proposed an initiative to create a free preschool program in Tempe. We partnered with Tempe Elementary School District and Kyrene School District to open up 20 classrooms across our city. On day one, we had vacancies in every one of those classrooms. 20 teaching positions, 20 instructional aid positions. We filled every single one. Do you know why? Because we offered a competitive wage. Because we offered quality professional development opportunities to those teachers. And it was clear that the city of Tempe, who's funding that initiative, has respect for educators. What's going on in Arizona right now is not just a funding crisis, and it is not just a working condition crisis, it is a respect crisis. Many of the educators in this room, when they look at what's going on in the state capitol and they see Doug Ducey sign a bill into law that says anybody with a pulse can get a teaching certificate now, that is a lack of respect. I went to college, I got a master's degree in education to be able to do my job. My wife got a master's degree in education to do her job. Educators around the state trained to be pedagogical professionals, and that's who our kids deserve to have in the fronts of their classrooms, not three-term congressmen who've never studied how to teach children. We need pedagogical professionals in every classroom.
Mr. Shapiro, that was something that was, we appreciate your apology, Mr. Riggs. So, I'm sorry there, Ms. Banks, you're up next.
Quite all right. So, I used to tell my husband he supported my teaching habit. Because I was in the classroom for 10 years, and I know exactly how much money I didn't make, and it was a struggle. But that's not why I left teaching, right? So the money or the lack of money is a problem. It's a serious problem, and if I could get more money to teachers, that is the first thing that I would do. That is what we have to do to solve this problem. But there was more to it than that, right? My classes were getting bigger and bigger. My students, I couldn't help them. No matter how hard I tried, the problems just kept getting bigger and bigger. So I left the classroom, I always say, not because of the money, but the money made it easy to leave. So we do have to, number one, increase teacher salaries. But number two, we have to improve working conditions. I did the math one time. If I never went to lunch and never used the restroom, I had 2 minutes per week to give students feedback. 2 minutes per student per week for feedback. That's not enough. My letter grade for my students' test scores at the end of the day were not going to be very high at 2 minutes per student per week. That's ridiculous. So we have to decrease the number of students that teachers see every week. We need more teachers. So it's not just to fill the classrooms that are empty now, but we need more teachers than that to decrease the number of students in the classroom. And then we have to get rid of evaluations based on test scores. That is degrading and it's wrong. And a child's test score should be about the child's learning and never about the teacher. We already know those test scores determine socioeconomic status better than they determine student learning. So we need to get rid of those evaluations that disrespect teachers and treat them like they don't know what they're doing. It's not right, it's not fair, and it's pushing people out of the classroom.
Thank you, Ms. Banks. Dr. Branch.
When everybody started laughing, I thought the yardstick was going to come out over reflecting back on my youth. Okay, going back to the last question, I told you how that we can get $1.4 billion back into this state for education. As the commercial says, but wait, there's more. Because we're a donor state. That means for every dollar that we send up to the U.S. Department of Education, we only get 75 cents back. So if we kept a quarter, how much of an increase would that be? 33%. 33%, that's another $1 billion a year that we would have for our school teachers. I teach teachers. Now, I do want to correct something that Mr. Riggs said. He says he's the only one with private experience. I ran companies. I've started companies. So that's incorrect. So I understand the value of a dollar and where to find the dollar. The dollar is up in the U.S. Department of Education. We bring that back. We can then hire quality teachers. I teach teachers over at Grand Canyon University. I see them every single day. I see what's going on with the teachers. And it is a respect issue. I said the other day, we are hiring unqualified teachers. I get a message from the governor's office that says, well, Dr. Branch, please don't say that. The narrative is they're underqualified. Well, I'm sorry, but if we set qualifications and they're not meeting qualifications, and we're not able to keep teachers because we're not paying them right, it is a respect issue. And I have a major problem with that. We need to bring the dollars down to the classroom. I disagree with raising taxes. The money's already there. We just have to bring it back to this state. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Branch. And no, I'm not into corporal punishment.
Well, I tell you, I used to get beat all the time with them rules.
Ms. Douglas, why was that? Thank you, Ms. Douglas.
I'm not sure what I can say that hasn't already been said. Yes, it is absolutely correct. We do not have a shortage of teachers. We have a shortage of teachers that want to be in the classroom. A large part of that is because of salary. Another piece of it is respect. We had standards that basically prescripted to teachers how they had to teach day in and day out. Those are now gone in Arizona. But one of the problems, and I will tell you, every effort to lower the standards of the quality of the profession, I have voted against at the state board. As a matter of fact, we had another vote yesterday in one of the support areas where, unfortunately, the board chose to lower the standards for the people who are serving our children. But I promise you, I will vote against it every time. You know, this came to be because they affectionately refer to it over at the legislature as the Sandra Day O'Connor bill, because the message was, well, Sandra Day Justice O'Connor can't come into our classrooms and teach our children law. Well, maybe that's so, and I bet she would do a great job for a day, but I defy her, with all respect to her and her position, to stay there for 180 days. We can't have people that are just content knowledge experts. We can't have people that are solely trained in pedagogy and technique. We must have both combined in order to have the best in our classroom for our children. I have a picture of a water wheel up by my office because it reminds me, and it's used to remind my staff, when we make bad decisions in education, how do we give that child that time back as we experiment with their education? And another thing, really quickly, is I'm doing something about it. We have a new grant, Troops to Teachers, to help our military transition appropriately trained into our classrooms. I don't know who this is.
Thank you, Ms. Douglas. Okay, we're to our last question, question number 5 on your worksheet there. And this one, as we mentioned, we drew numbers for the order of response. So the last question is, in closing, why are you the best candidate to lead Arizona's public education system? And we start with Mr. Riggs.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciated this opportunity, but you know what I'd most like is to hear from you. I'd love to get your comments, your ideas, your advice at my email account, riggsforaz@gmail.com, riggsforaz@gmail.com. I'm also on social media at riggsforaz. I believe I'm the best candidate for Superintendent of Public Instruction because I have the deepest and broadest experience that prepares me to take the leadership of the Arizona Department of Education and with my colleagues in the department and on the State Board of Education to oversee our K-12 education system, educating 1.1 million students in grades K through 12. It's a big job, it's an important job, and it's a job that requires, I think, a unique combination of skills. I believe I have the proven executive experience and skills, a deep knowledge of education policies and practices at the federal, state, and local level. And by the way, I make no apology for having been a 3-term United States Congressman, chairing the House Education Subcommittee, authoring federal laws on charter schools, vocational and technical education, special education, juvenile justice and delinquency prevention. But it requires that deep knowledge. It also takes what I call political and legislative smarts, some savvy, the ability to be able to influence policy. And I think I can talk that talk with our elected representatives in the state legislature. I would very much appreciate your consideration. I ask for your vote and your support, and this much I promise you, I'll make you proud as a superintendent of public instruction who will always lead with courage and integrity, and someone that you can trust, who will take responsibility and be a competent, effective, ethical superintendent of public instruction.
Thank you, Mr. Riggs. Ms. Livingston?
Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I want your vote because I'm a teacher. I've never been in administration, and I'm actually kind of proud of that. I stayed in the classroom, boots on the ground. If I don't earn your vote, I go right back into the classroom. My feet are firmly planted, and my heart is 100% with the tens of thousands of kids I've taught. Somebody said, you need to run. So I listened, I thought, and I said yes. Why? Because I know I will not only implement policy with the best of our hearts, of our kids in stone, but I will also be able to lobby the House and the Senate and the governor. Truth be told, I'm a legislator's wife. My husband's name is Representative David Livingston out of LD 22. He didn't grow up here, but I did. I went to Central High School, Bobcat, went to Arizona State. Degree in broadcasting, and later a Montessori degree, and a degree in education when we came back. Taught every grade but 5th, sat on 2 school boards, Peoria Unified School District and the Maricopa Community College Governing Board. While I've never been in administration, I have seen the other side. Maricopa budgets, well, it's about $1 billion budget. I've seen what it's like on the administrative side. And I've seen with my heart and my feet every day what it's like to be a classroom teacher. Talk to me now, talk to me in August. My message won't change. And neither will my heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Livingston. Ms. Douglas?
Thank you so much for allowing me to be the privilege of serving you as your superintendent. When I ran for this office 4 years ago, I ran because the federal government was controlling our standards. And I promised you we would change them. And I was in office about 2.5 weeks when I got a call from the powers that be that said, we don't care what you promised the people of Arizona. We don't care what you said you're going to do. That is not going to change. 2.5 months in, we had a release from the copyright, from the national copyright holders. 10 months in, the State Board repealed Common Core, and December of 2016, we have new standards adopted by our State Board of Education. To me, this job is about serving you. We've held over 50 listening tours, town halls, since I came into office, all across this state, because it's about bringing every single one of you to the table, not sitting in an office in Phoenix, not just talking to lobbyists, but talking to all of you, because they're your children, they're your grandchildren, and their future matters to America. We will be bringing forward new history and science standards this spring to make sure that once again our children learn what it means to be an American. We can't have these things to continue to be missing from the classroom. Oh, I guess time is up. But a lot of people, you've heard a lot tonight, but people are talking about what they will theoretically do when they're in office. I'm telling you about what I have done, and I've done it for you because nothing matters more than the education of your children and your grandchildren. They are truly a blessing. Thank you, and God bless you all, and especially our teachers. God bless the work you do each and every single day. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Douglas. Dr. Branch, you're up.
Thank you very much for having us here tonight. One of my biggest influences in my life was my mother. She's about 5'2", New York concrete, tough woman. My senior year of school, we lived alone in a rented trailer. She got sick. Just about 3 weeks after I graduated high school, she died. And I've been on my own ever since. But since that day, I played college football, went into the United States Air Force, met, fell in love, and married the love of my life, Adele. We've been married now going on 38 years. Lord bless us with one son, Ben. He is also honorably discharged from the United States Air Force. He currently lives in Hawaii. After I got out of the Air Force, I started designing computer chips. Then I rapidly rose up through the ranks of management, corporate leadership, and eventually corporate ownership. About 16 years ago, I was asked to teach my knowledge at the university. I fell in love with teaching. As you all do, we don't do this for the money, but it would be nice to have some, right? So, since that time, I've held the administrative position as Dean of Education, Dean of Technology, Chairman for the School of Business and Technology. I teach at Liberty University, I teach here at Grand Canyon University, and I teach teachers. So from humble beginnings, I have never failed. I'm looking you in the eye and I'm telling you tonight exactly what I'm going to do. And I will live up to that. Our teachers and our children deserve better than a career politician. And I'm telling you that right now because we've only sent those up there for the last 20 years to 30 years. And now you see what we have. It's our fault. It's about time that you elect somebody with the credentials that I bring, and nobody else even has any of them. Where where Livingston said she's taught every grade level. That's not correct. I'm the only one that's taught from the doctorate level.
Thank you. Dr. Branch, thank you. Mr. Gelbart, you're up.
Thank you. I believe I'm the best candidate for Superintendent of Public Instruction because I'm the only one up here with a broader vision of what's possible in Arizona. We've got to think bigger. We've got to have a long-term plan of who do we want to be here in Arizona? What do we want to be known for? What do we want to do that no other state is doing? And we can start in the public education system. Do we need to solve the funding problems? Yes. Do we need to solve the school rankings, the letter grades, the certification? Yes, we need to work on all that. But we need to think beyond that as well. We have the opportunity here in Arizona to build a truly innovative, personalized, next-generation school system that no other state is going to be doing. If you compare the school system to the era when it was developed, it's like a Model T. I don't want a better Model T. I want a Tesla. I want a new car. We got to think of what we can do here in Arizona. So how do we get there? How do we do that? As Superintendent of Public Instruction at the Department of Education, I want to help you in Chandler and other districts be more flexible, be more innovative, launch new pilot programs, see what's going to work for our kids, and get out of your way. Make it as easy as possible to try those things and support you in those efforts. Again, we have tremendous opportunity there. And my background, I'm an engineer, I'm a problem solver, I'm a doer, and I want to solve those problems, find solutions to our challenges, and bring all the stakeholders together to make a difference, to get results, and not just make noise and echo partisan talking points. That's what you deserve, and that's what we need in Arizona. I'll bring a new perspective for this office, for our education system, for our state, and I hope I can count on your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Ms. Banks.
So I was a teacher for 10 years. I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I would like to go back to the classroom. So maybe you should vote for me because I'm going to create conditions that will make it possible for me to go back to the classroom. But I left the classroom to fight for change. We have to make changes. We are killing our rural schools. I've been out there to see it. We are pushing teachers out of the classroom, and we've got to do something about it. In 41 states, the superintendent of public instruction is nonpartisan. I'm running as an independent because I believe this office should be nonpartisan. These candidates did a lovely job telling you tonight what they believe and what they think, and they were completely sincere. But that doesn't change the fact that they all have party platforms, and those party platforms are very clear. This is what the party will ask you to do. I don't have any obligation to a party. I am not interested in a political career. I'm not using this office to create name recognition for myself so that I can do something else down the road. All I care about is that every student in every corner of Arizona gets the best education. I am driven by making sure that our students have an opportunity to succeed. I would like to tell you that I care about you and convince you to vote for me, but the truth is, I don't. I'm sure you're lovely people, and I wish you well, but all I care about are the kids. That is what will drive me every day. That is what gets me up in the morning now, and that is what I go to bed thinking about every night. I grew up in Arizona. I'm a public school student. My children go to public school. I believe in our schools, and I want to advocate for them.
Thank you, Ms. Banks. Mr. Shapiro.
Nobody up here is more invested in the future of our public education system than I am, and that's because I have a 6 and a 7-year-old, 2 little girls in our public schools in this state. But don't vote for me because I'm invested. My wife and I, as I mentioned, are both educators. That's my career. I've been a professional educator, but don't vote for me for that reason. I served on my local school board at Tempe Union. We took our district from a mixture of grades, for what they're worth, to a straight A school district during my time on that board. Not because of my work, but because of great administrators and teachers across our district and incredible work from students. But don't vote for me for that reason. I served in the state legislature. I was on the education committee all 6 years. I was the ranking Democrat on that committee 4 of those 6 years. I was the leader of the Democrats in the state Senate. Don't vote for me for those reasons. Vote for me because I believe that incremental change is not enough. Our schools today are on life support. And if we do not elect the right person for this job in November, my fear is that our public school system in this state will die in this next 4-year term. Because, let's be clear, that is the plan from the folks in power at our state capitol today. They believe that education should not just be given away for free. They think it should be bought and sold as a commodity and somebody should profit. Those of us who believe differently, those of us who believe that educational opportunity should be guaranteed to every child in this state, have to fight back this November. And I'm sorry, I am not dispassionate about anything, as you probably learned about me tonight, and so I do want to apologize to Mr. Riggs. I should not have gone there. I could have made the point without mentioning his credentials. But I just want to be clear that this is incredibly important. It's important to me. It should be important to all of us. And we have to work between now and next November to save the education system in this state. And I want to work alongside you to do exactly that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shapiro. Ms. Hoffman, your candidate number 8.
Last but not least, I hope. For me, this political journey started when I watched the confirmation hearing for Betsy DeVos. In case you missed it, which if you missed it, I'm jealous, but in case you missed it, Betsy DeVos was confirmed to be our Secretary of Education without having ever taught in a school, and she could not answer even the most basic question about education policy. It was that moment that I was propelled into action, and within a few weeks I filed to run for office because I believe that we must have more educators in office if we want to see any kind of benefit for our schools. I am proud to be one of many Democratic women running for statewide office and a clean elections candidate. For a moment, I want you to imagine if our teachers had competitive pay. Imagine if all of our students felt safe and welcome at school. Imagine if we were expanding our bilingual programs. And imagine if all of our public schools had the funding that they needed to provide the resources and services that every student needs. I know that Arizona's future starts in our schools, and only through investing in our schools and competitive pay for teachers can we bring our state from the bottom to the top to become leaders of academic success. Thank you so much for your time. Have a good night.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman. Oops, I think it's going to go to Leanna there. Just want to say another big thank you to all 8 of our candidates. It's tough, I know, when you're on the stage like this, but it's a tough job you're going for. So we do appreciate your time and your efforts. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being very respectful and very objective listeners. So candidates, you can applaud for the audience. And thank you to Susan, our timekeeper, and Sarah, our water runner. And Leanna, it's back to you, and thank you for the opportunity to have moderated them. Thank you, Deacon Robin, for your moderating. And again, Susan and all of the participants. I think, where is Maria? There you go, you stepped to the back. Maria, I'm sorry, you're going to love me even more than you do now. Stand up, please. This is Maria Hanse. She is our Vice President of our Executive Board of the Political Action, and because of this is her brainchild and her hard work. And Maria, we thank you. Thank you to this Chandler Library, and to the AEA for helping us spread the word, and to the NEA for the Teacher Leadership Institute and its mentors. Just wanted to let you know the primary election for this election is August 28th. So please make sure you have registered to vote if you're not already. And the deadline for registration is July 30th. We also provided you with an interest card, so if you would care to fill that out, we'd appreciate it. And we'd like to thank you all again, and CEA and VIP, thank you all for everything you've done, and for all of you who came out tonight. Thanks again.